We're continuing our conversation today with what I like to call the garbage phenomenon. It's one of my favorite topics. But we'll be addressing the question, how can I systematically address the quality issues of my data? Now, there's a saying that you may have heard before, garbage in, garbage out, or GIGO. What does that mean? It means you have this bad data that feeds into your data management system, and that feeds into models. And then your garbage data makes garbage models. And so you work so hard to create this model in order to improve your decisions and make this decision on whether to buy this company or not buy this company. But in the end, garbage in, garbage out, would have been better off just flipping a coin in the end, because it's not, bad data is not helping you. Now, I hate to break this to you, but your data could be characterized as garbage. Basically, no matter who you are, like what you're working with, your data could be characterized as garbage. And it's because, no data is perfect. And also, data quality, it varies a lot across an organization and also specific functions within each organization. So even if you're like, well, no, our organization is really good with high data quality, well, like everywhere in every aspect where data is captured, it's going to be perfect. Well, no. So to some degree, there are going to be inaccuracies. There are going to be inconsistencies. Is your data perfectly accurate, consistent, and reliable? Well, no, it's not. So then is it garbage? Well, that's a good question. Because one man's trash is another man's treasure. I mean, maybe for one purpose, someone might say like, well, that data is garbage. There's nothing we can use it for. But someone else might be able to use that same garbage data, and through an analysis and through a model, they might be able to improve a decision and generate millions of dollars of value for the company. So it really depends on this situation. So GIGO depends on the question that you are asking. That is so important. So the quality or garbageness of your data depends on the question. So in some scenarios, if your question, for one type of question, you could have perfect data. For a different question, the data could be perfectly useless and be complete garbage. So one way of thinking about this, what percentage of the data can be misclassified, and you could still yield like a really good model that would improve a decision? 5%, 10%, 0.0001%, which is the case sometimes. Or another way of looking at this, within how many millimeters is this accurate? For, say, a factory example, what percentage of our transactions are captured? And also, okay, let's say it's garbage. That we accept that is going to be inaccurate. Well, is it systematically biased or different? Is it consistently too high, too low? Is it omitting certain categories so that it's going to indicate to us incorrect insights that can potentially destroy value within the company? So one of the examples that I like to use is there was a company that had salespeople that were closing the sale with a product, and then for delivery of that product would take a couple months. And they were in this predicament because on one side they had really high customer satisfaction scores, and on the other there were a lot of complaints, returns, and other issues. And so they're looking at this and they're asking, what's going on? What should we do? And it took, a total of, one of the analysts that was involved in this looked at the situation and just started asking the right questions. And the right question to ask was, well, when was customer satisfaction captured? And customer satisfaction was captured at the time of the sale. Well, if they're capturing customer satisfaction at the time of the sale and not the end of the process, well, there's going to be very, very different things. I mean, maybe the salesperson promised the moon to them and they're happy about it, but then when the moon isn't delivered, they're unhappy about the situation. So yes, it's garbage in, garbage out, but certain questions can still be answered while others cannot. So just, you need to remember that ARC, accurate, reliable, consistent. And we can also recognize that, say, inaccurate but consistent data could also yield very good models. I mean, imagine that you have a tracker that's tracking how many calories that you're consuming. And let's say that it's always over by 10%. So if you consume 1,800 calories, in reality, you consumed just under 2,000 calories. Now, it's like, well, it's inaccurate, but is it useful? Well, if you're using this to track whether it's going up or down, and it's consistently tracking very, very well your calories going up or down, well, it's still useful to a large degree. In fact, it might be completely useful. If you didn't care about the accuracy, but just the direction of the calorie consumption, then it's inaccurate but consistent, and you can generate a good model that could inform your dietary needs based off of this. I will now step down off of my high horse, and we'll talk a little bit about the symptoms of failure and how this relates to GIGO. Now, if you look at literature, whether it's McKinsey, HBR, and other management journals, like data analysis initiatives have common themes when they just completely bomb and fail. There are certain consistent themes. And one of those is this data first mentality where like IT takes the lead, and like we're gonna spend 3 years creating this, awesome system to provide this great data to you. But one of the unfortunate aspects of this is that this is setting up IT up to fail, because does information technology, do the people there know if the quality of the data is good or not? Well, frequently they do not, because it's being fed to them by operations and by these other places. And so they're creating this system where it's saying we're going to do this data analysis initiative and we want to generate the data first. Well, it can end up exploding in your face because you spend so much time, months, years before anything starts to appear. And by then the organization has changed, and much of your data is either not useful or it was never useful to begin with because there weren't those checks along the way. And so you can think of this, very similar to, say, a failed ERP implementation where they try and implement, an enterprise-wide system. It's going to solve all of our problems, but it's going to take a very long time to do this. And by the time you get to the end of the process, frequently, if expectations aren't managed, and if planning wasn't occurring exactly how it should be, what can happen? You get to the end of this process, and it's like, oh, well, this system isn't nearly as useful as we thought it would be because it's already, say, out of date, or it's not doing what we thought it was going to. And this takes us full circle to data quality and this iterative approach that we need to take with these initiatives. And just to remind you that management generally knows what these high value cases are. This is the decision that we need to make. Here's how we're going to deliver value to the customer. Here's our overall strategy as a company and how we're differentiating from our competition. They generally know what those are. And so if we work collaboratively across the organization, we can provide these short-term feedback loops where we can detect whether the data is in a good enough state to actually answer these questions. And if they're not, then we can make the changes that are needed. And so your data science team could create the requested models with the existing data, and they could provide it to management. But then at that point, you can collaboratively evaluate the quality of these models and say, well, how could we change this? And we can propose data improvements and estimate benefits and costs. It all ties together in this iterative process where we're not trying to nail it exactly right the first time. Because remember, no data is perfect. There's always going to be inaccuracies. It's not going to be perfectly accurate, reliable, consistent. Because of this, we need to evaluate for this specific question, is it sufficiently accurate, reliable, and consistent? And that's going to change every time that management comes with a different type of question or process that you need to actually attack and improve. So a summary for today, your data, it's flawed. Hate to break it to you. So some areas are going to be more flawed than others, but your data is flawed. Now, does that matter? Well, that's going to depend on the question that's being addressed. Sometimes your data, the exact same data set, will be great and perfect, and it's exactly what you need. And for one question, and then you take a different question that we should be able to answer with that data set, but it's not, say, reliable or consistent enough or accurate enough to actually address that question. And so as the questions change, as the needs of the business change, you need to continually assess whether your data is at the point where it's, is this garbage or is it treasure? So have a questions first mentality, not data first. Not all the data is going to be perfect in every way, and then we're going to turn around and try something. Go with a questions first mentality and maintain that iterative process and realize this isn't going to be perfect. In fact, it'll never be perfect. But we're going to continually march toward improvement.